Okay, the live stream should be available now. So if you go to the first tweet in the jumbotron, you'll be able to follow along.
Sorry, I don't have any information about that, but I found something else. Do you want to know how to read my screen?
Today, we're going to read through the San Francisco reparations proposal. Um,
Sorry, I don't understand.
well, so basically, San Francisco has this group called ARC or AARAC. Um, it's part of their sub. It's like a subcommittee within the San Francisco City Council. Um, Let me switch my screen 1 second. So here's their about page. They say, I'll show the committee members real quick. So African American Reparations Advisory Committee, AARAC. So if you can see my screen, here are the members. Reverend Dr. Amos Brown is also on the California Reparations Task Force. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's about 15 members. The chair is a guy named Eric McDonald. But here, let's get into the actual meat and potatoes. Basically, similar to the California Reparations Task Force, this committee got formed, and then their job is to come up with proposals to kind of like fix things in the city. And so they came up with this report. It's about 60 pages long. They published it in December, and in it, there's a proposal for reparations for $5 million lump sum payment. What I pulled up is the eligibility requirements, and then we'll get more into their other um, kind of like proposals. But the main one people are talking about is the $5 million. So actually, let me just show you that really quickly. So it's this one right here. So it says financial reparations. Objective one, create a comprehensive suite of financial reparations that is made immediately available to those who qualify under the eligibility parameters set forth by the committee. And that's why we're going to read through those eligibility requirements. But it says actions. 1.1, provide a one time lump sum payment of $5 million to each eligible person. Rationale, a lump sum payment would compensate the affected population for the decades of harms that they have experienced, and will redress the economic and opportunity losses that Black San Franciscans have endured collectively as a result of both intentional decisions and unintended harms perpetuated by city policy. So that's kind of where everyone is going with this 5 million. Now, let's read through the eligibility requirements that I always talked about before, because this is the crucial part. And only it seems as if only parts of this have been shared publicly. Like some people are only quoting parts of the eligibility requirements. Okay, so here's what it actually says. So eligibility for reparations. Checklist for eligibility. Required an individual who has identified as Black/African American on public documents for at least 10 years. That goes back to Darity and his recommendation. And then you have 18 years or older, so you have to at least be those two. Those are like minimum requirements. And then there's an additional requirement where you have to meet at least two criteria from the following list. and you must have supporting documentation. So, one, you basically have to at least check two of these in addition to the identifying as Black or African American for 10 years and be 18 years or older. So, one option is that you were born in San Francisco between 1940 and 1996 and has proof of residency in San Francisco for at least 13 years. Two, migrated to San Francisco between 1940 and 1996 and has proof of residency in San Francisco for at least 13 years. Three, personally or a direct descendant of someone incarcerated by the failed war on drugs. Record of attendance in San Francisco public schools during the time of consent decree to complete desegregation within the school system. Another option is descendant of someone enslaved through U.S. chattel slavery before 1865. Another one is displaced or direct descendant of someone displaced from San Francisco by urban renewal between 1954 and 1973. And then another one is listed or the direct descendant of a certificate of preference holder. And then the last one is member of an historically marginalized group that experienced lending discrimination in San Francisco between 1937 and 1968, or subsequently experienced lending discrimination and formerly redlined San Francisco communities between 1968 and 2008. So those are the options. Let's count one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight. Eight options. And you have to meet at least two of them in addition to um, having identified as Black or African American on public documents for at least 10 years and be 18 years or older. So that's the big one in terms of everything. So if we go back to their recommendations, the financial um, recommendations, they talk about this lump sum, right? So provide one-time lump sum payment of $5 million to each eligible person. And they said, right, that you have to meet the eligibility requirements. It says available to those who qualify under the eligibility parameters set forth by the committee. So the ones we just read would be the requirements to receive the 5 million. You have to meet at least one of these. So on one level, um, the number of 5 million is the closest to our $6 million calculation that we've done, which includes the 40 acres, the bank, and the value of our ancestors' labor and skills. Um, but what this doesn't do very well is um, it kind of leaves open cracks for potentially um, people who aren't descendants of uh, people who were actually enslaved in the United States to also receive benefits. So that's something where the UN definition of reparations talks about victims being those who collectively suffered harm or their descendants. So this kind of widens the net, so to speak. Um, excuse me. And then in terms of restitution, at least as far as I can see, there is no restitution, but it does include compensation, right? So the amount of money would be the compensation. Um, it would probably meet satisfaction, but in terms of rehabilitation, restitution, um, and discontinuation, those are doubtable. You know what I mean? It's not. There's no kind of guarantee when it comes to those other ones. So it's not a perfect match in terms of reparations. Um, but if they can, again, this is a committee report, so the city council basically would still need to approve it, just like the California Reparations Task Force still needs to be approved by the state legislature after it makes its final report in July of this year. Um, so if things can be improved, in terms of what the requirements and the criteria would be, that would be ideal. Um, like it should only be for people who are descendants of freedmen, essentially. Um, and then, you know, I think a big question would be, why 1940 and 1996, and then why 1954 and 1973, and why 1937 and 1968 and 1968 and 2008. Um, like figuring out why they chose those dates would be a good question. Um, but there's about 60 pages, so I haven't read through the entire report, but um, when I've looked at all the media that has gone out and all the tweets so far that have been published, um, many of them don't mention all the requirements. They may mention the first two. Um, some have mentioned the fact that you can be related to, or sorry, descended or personally someone who's incarcerated. So I've seen ones mention that, and I've seen ones mention you need to be born in San Francisco, but I haven't seen them all mentioned, all of these requirements mentioned, and certainly not in the context of you must meet at least two of them. So I do find that interesting. Um, but yeah, other than that, we can look at what else they talked about. There are other recommendations. There's a few other financial recommendations. One of them is supplement African American income of lower income households to reflect the area median income AMI annually for at least 250 years, 97K in 2022. 1.3 provide access to a spectrum of financial education from beginning to advanced. 1.4 create public bank framework to ensure that unbanked people have fair options and expanded access to credit, loans, financing, and other tools for leveraging financial power. 1.5 recruit a black-owned community bank to San Francisco or expand an existing institution with a black-owned partner financial institution or a Freedmen's Bank. So they do suggest a Freedmen's Bank. That's pretty cool. 1.6 finance a comprehensive debt forgiveness program that clears all educational, personal, credit card, payday loans, etc. 1.7 offer recruitment planning services and services available to augment current retirees' financial state, particularly for low wage workers. 1.8 introduce tax credits for those who qualify for reparations, payroll tax, business tax, property tax, etc. 1.9 creating a black reparations trust or other entity that can accept funds for the sole purpose of investing in black communities. Such an entity should allow donations from individuals and corporations who want to give their land, real property, or financial assets to the reparations effort. B. Explore and create structures and pathways to mitigate tax consequences for recipients of reparations funds. C. Create mechanisms for enforcement and accountability for all activities related to reparations. 1.10 create legal structures to protect those who receive reparations from financial speculators or predators, including court block accounts/trust accounts. So that's the financial compensation. They have some stuff on like rental on housing. Let me see what else they got in here. Yeah, there's a few more that they give in terms of suggestions, but those are all the financial ones in terms of compensation. Um, so, what do y'all think about the eligibility requirements? Any kind of thoughts on what it says, or how you would change it, or anything like that?
Hi, family. I'm in a meeting, but I'm going to quickly speak.
No
But
worries.
I am for a state, um, for a state
For
reparations
a city.
program.
This one's
Our
for city.
city, for
Yeah.
city, for San Francisco.
Yep.
I personally I'm kind of feeling it. I like the college being addressed. I like the payday loans because as a community we're more susceptible to those predatory lending practices. I
Mm-hmm.
like all of that stuff. It's not a federal program now. I don't know if it opens the door for will it affect us federally by opening the door for other people? But the 1940s, during that time, I mean, I personally would have to look at the demographics between the time frame, but I personally kind of feeling it.
Yeah, it's not bad, but it could be tightened up. You know what I mean? Like there's a few parts that could be tightened, especially when it comes to like the criteria. Um, but it's definitely in the right direction. Um, so that's at least hopeful. Um, but I think if there is some possibility for this to be improved, hopefully it can be. But this is a final report that came out like December 22nd or something like that. Um, so it's kind of crazy. Like most of the news, we're just hearing about it now. Like almost a month later, so to speak. Um, so yeah, this is the actual text from sf.gov website. So this is a no news article. This is actually what it says, what they published. So Queen Bee, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I do think some of that eligibility is problematic. Now, I'm not able to have that document up and have this face up at the same time for some reason. But there's a part there about someone who's a descendant of someone who was enslaved, I'm not incarcerated
Yes.
because of the war on drugs. Is that?
Yes.
How's that reading? How's that go again?
It said personally or the direct descendant of someone incarcerated by the failed war on drugs.
Well, yeah. See, that's problematic. I think that can open it up for anybody.
Yeah, and so
I don't like that.
Yeah, see, the thing is, like, they do make it a requirement. We gotta have identified Black or African American, be 18 years or older, and then also meet these additional two criteria. But you're right, like, even still, all of these, there's some little crack that could happen. Like, the only one that you couldn't really cheat is the descendant of someone enslaved through U.S. chattel slavery before 1865, right? Like, that one would be very clear, right? Like, obviously.
Right.
But all the other ones, there's some ability where, like, another group who decides to maybe identify as Black or African American could qualify as well.
Right. And again, I don't know what's going on. I don't know about California anymore, but like when you check off a job application, does it say Black or African American, or they're like, you know what I'm saying?
I think mainly, yeah, in California mainly it's like Black or African American, or say slash. There's not many parts to delineate. There'll be parts where you would say like, are you Hispanic or not, and things like that.
Yeah, because those are the areas that are still to me problematic. Because it still allows someone from one of the other countries, Africa or whatnot, to still check that box. So
exactly, yeah, and that's kind of the big problem. Like someone else who is not necessarily a freeman would be able to qualify under these circumstances. Um, I think like they should move the descendant of someone enslaved through U.S. child slavery as one of the three requirements. Like you have to meet those, and then you just have to meet one of these maybe or something like that. Like that would probably be better.
Yeah, and another thought I'm having, Eric, because I know a lot of this eligibility is coming from Dr. Darity's recommendations.
Exactly.
And he's framed some things about like you have to be, I guess you have to have claimed or identified as Black or something for 10 years.
Yep.
And I'm just gonna put this out here. I think that needs to be tightened up because I think that, let's just say, we get our reparations conversation going and so on and so forth. But let's just say that does not come to fruition for 10 years. I still think people can start identifying as black now just so that they can say, yeah, I've been identifying as black, even though they weren't previously.
Not for real.
Yeah,
Marcel
they
has
can
said
start
this
doing
too.
that now.
Right, right. No, I agree. I joke that it should be your whole life. Like, you know what I mean? Like, basically, like, at
Right,
what point would you be switching? You know what I mean? Like, I
right,
don't get it.
yeah, yeah, that's just problematic to me.
Yeah, it should be like your whole life. Like, you have to be identifying this your whole life, and I think Marcel said like if you switch 1 year and like you disqualified, it's like what you doing over here switching up?
Right, because again, because we know that people, there's going to be people who are going to try to defraud the system,
Right.
and they can just start doing that. Oh well, yeah, we can just get ready for this thing that might happen in 8, 10 years. We just start claiming blacks from now on. Don't say you nothing else. I mean, I don't know. I
Yeah,
just
no, seriously. Yeah, no, seriously. I agree. Like, it should be like your whole life. You know what I mean? And like from birth. So, because it does leave a hole, and we want to remove as many loopholes as we can because that's how they're going to take advantage of it in the future, anyways. And if we
yeah,
can eliminate the loopholes, the better. So
eliminate the fraud because
exactly.
I just see this being, there's going to be some potential for fraud if it's not tightened up.
Facts, facts. The one thing they did do well that could also be put in here, um, they talk about being born in San Francisco. Um, that's a good one in the context of like local programs because like you want to make sure that like people don't double dip. Like you're not like going from program to program. You know what I mean? Just like qualify for different programs all over the country. So like having a requirement where you're either like born or like the migrated one is okay in the context of well, it still have to be a long time. Um, like that's reasonable. So, um, it's kind of interesting to see what they put in here. But I definitely would say the descendant of basically a freedman needs to be moved up to the fundamental requirements, and then you could have like some of these where you just need to pick one, and then you could change the need to identify as Black or African American since birth.
Right. Yeah. What's the last one was marginalized population.
Yeah, that one was a little sketchy. It was like
Yeah.
member of historically marginalized group that experienced lending discrimination in San Francisco between 1937 and 1968, or subsequently experienced lending discrimination in formerly redlined San Francisco communities between 1968 and 2008. So it's kind of weird because again, it's supposed to be under like Black and African American and then 18 years old, but then it's like member of a historically marginalized group.
Yeah.
That's kind of
Yeah.
ambiguous.
Yeah.
So it's
That's kind
like
of messy.
yeah, it's kind of like a you might as well just check that other box. You can check this one. Like it's kind of like giving people like a hint, like you could scam this. Like that's not good. It's
Right.
gonna encourage people to try to get what they don't necessarily deserve.
Right. Or again, if the language is not tightened up and really scrutinized legally, somebody's gonna find a way. Well, I was marginalized. I might not have been black, but I was marginalized. Maybe even tried to sue the city behind something like this. But they
Hmm.
don't get this language tight.
Right, and they say have supporting documentation, so it'll be interesting to see what type of documentation they require. Like, you know what I mean? Is it just like, something you said, and or is it something where it's a government document? You got to prove like something actually official. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm interested in finding out what that's going to be too. Well, I don't have any family living in San Francisco anymore, but I used to have, some uncles
Right.
that are now gone on. They're no longer with us. That lived there, but they didn't have any children. So,
Sorry to hear. Yeah, but
Yes,
depending on the
and that's
dates,
the
they could
closest
have
I can get
qualified.
it, you know.
Right.
But yeah, it would be interesting to kind of follow somebody who meets that criteria that lives there.
Yeah, I'm gonna see. I know there's Lena from SF. She may meet these requirements. Um, I'll try to connect with her and see what her kind of ideas are about this. So there's about like 45,000 people in San Francisco that are black right now, but in terms of these requirements, not everyone's gonna qualify. Um, there's gonna be, let's say, what percent is like over. Like I looked at the U.S. Census data. Let's go back to it really quick. Looking at the U.S. Census data, it was something like let me go to age. Give me 1 second. Like persons under 18 is about like 13%. Um, so like let's say like 85% is basically over 18. Um, so like you take off 15% from 45K, that'll probably get you down to like 30K or something maybe. Um, and then you got like, let's see, like looking at their other requirements. Let's see. 'Cause a lot of them have to deal with like either you have to be there between a certain time. Let me see. The only ones that didn't have to do with you having to be there at a certain time was maybe that you're a descendant of a freedman. You know what I mean? That's probably the only one. Every other one has to do with a certain time period. So 1940 to 1996. Another one is during the drug war. Another one is the time of during desegregation of the public school system. Another one is 1954 to 1973. Another one says certificate of a preference holder, and I'm assuming that has to deal with some type of government program where like they basically gave you a certificate. Um, and then the last one is 1937 to 1968 and 1968 to 2008. So almost all of them have to do with some time period, except for the fact that you're a freedman. Um,
Yeah, I'm thinking that 1940 is 1940, right?
yeah, 19,
40.
19
Because, a lot of, I think a
1937
lot
and
of black people,
1968. Yeah,
okay, I know a lot of black people started migrating out west.
right.
And that San Francisco, particularly Hunters Point, I think used to be one of the, I want to say,
Yeah, you had that in the Fillmore's district.
right, because that's where a lot of black people actually were living.
Yep. You eventually had people like Miles Davis and John Coltrane out there. Um, who else was out there? That Maya Angelou was out there. Um,
Mm-hmm.
who else? A lot of people came out there.
So I
Um,
would say a lot of went to Pacifica, not necessarily right there in San Francisco.
yeah, definitely. And then obviously Oakland too, right?
Right.
So
Yeah, because of the Alameda, they used to be
yeah,
like a naval supply. So I
exactly.
know
A lot
that.
of ports. So yeah, a lot of people working at the ports or in the military. Um, but yeah, so this is interesting to see the requirements to kind of get a closer view. Um, Apparently, this organization, this committee on the city council got formed like late 2020, like after the George Floyd protest. And so it's kind of been lurking in the background, but it didn't really put out this final report till December of this year, or last year, 2022. So this is kind of what they came up with. So it seems like they're trying, but again, this report would have to be turned into legislation by the city council, and then actually passed into law, which is kind of like it's gotten a lot of press, but that doesn't mean that like the city council's gonna like pass this. You know what I mean? Like actually sign this into law. So that's another thing to take into consideration.
And Eric, did I read somewhere that this proposal doesn't have any funding? I thought I
Um,
read somewhere that it was funded. It was supposed to be funded by like a. They're looking at volunteer funding for
oh,
this, and they don't have
that
any yet.
no. So if they did fund this, it would come from like the government, like San Francisco only. Like either their revenue or they would probably have to sell bonds or something like that. But they did suggest something like creating a trust fund where people could like give their like they could volunteer their wealth to this program as well. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, I'm through. I'll let somebody else
Now you're
have
good.
the mic. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. How about you, Phoenix? I know you might have came in late, but we were going through the eligibility requirements for the San Francisco reparations proposal that was put out by AARAC, the African American um, Reparations Advisory Committee. Um,
I really,
you said not really? Or did you get cut off?
I don't.
Sound like you're getting cut off. I don't know if it's just me though. But yeah, so I mean, this is kind of where we're looking at. I think it's important that we like actually go to like the source, like the .govs, and read what they actually say. Like news articles are good, but sometimes they're very hypey or they're very um, overblown, and they don't actually get into the details. It's kind of like someone puts out one article, and then people just read the article and keep copying that article without having even read the source. And that's kind of what I've noticed once I read the actual like eligibility. I'm like, oh well, a lot of people didn't actually read this. They just kind of copy what everyone else is saying. Go for it, Phoenix.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, I was getting cut off. Yeah, I don't have too much to say. And you are correct. Like these days, everything, the news to me just seems to be opinion,
Hmm.
and really not a whole lot of journalistic integrity. So I'm glad you are bringing up the fact that we need to look at the actual bill that is, presented and not necessarily just looking at the journal, the article. But I will say I'm okay with the eligibility as long as we narrow that down to American freedmen and American freedmen only. I'm good.
Right, right. After that, yeah, it would be pretty good. Like if we just move that requirement up to the one that's required, like you have to meet all three of them, and then there was some where you could like meet one of these others. Maybe that would probably be more of a good idea. You know what I mean? Um, but yeah, overall, it's not that bad. It's going in the right direction. It's far better than the Evanston one. You definitely say that.
Absolutely. That was just welfare. That was just
Right,
a welfare program. And I just like,
definitely.
and I just feel like for any of this, like even for the groups that's like, oh, Africans, have suffered and Caribbeans have suffered. Okay, that may be true, but the policies were not made specifically for them. They were made for American freedmen all the way. They didn't have those other groups in mind, especially because immigration wasn't that popular until the 60s the 70s and 80s,
Hmm.
the 90s, and not even the
Right,
70s. I'm just going to take it up to the 80s and 90s
right.
that we start to see, So we know that all of those policies meant to undermine and damage us was made specifically for us. So we, as a group, need to be specifically repaired.
Facts. Nah, I
Mm-hmm.
appreciate that. I definitely agree. We got to get really deep into who the group is for. Like the other day, we were going through the 14th Amendment and what Ketanji Brown Jackson said about um, the use of the 14th Amendment, why it was created. Then we read her reference of Friedman and Thaddeus Stevens' speech introducing the 14th Amendment in Congress, where he uses the word Friedman three times. And, it's one of those things where it's like we need to go back to the source material and pull out who were they talking about, and kind of reaffirm, like they were talking about us, you know what I mean? And they're very clear why these things existed and why we specifically needed that repair. Um, there was even talk recently about, oh, there's white freedmen, and that's another part of disinformation and misinformation. Um, in fact, there's a House and Senate committee investigation on the failure of the Freedmen Bank, where this question is discussed, and they make clear that there are no such thing, and this bank was made solely and specifically for freedmen who were formerly enslaved, and you know, it's kind of crazy when you kind of get to all this disinformation. You can even read the original Freedmen's Bill Bureau Act or the Bank Freedmen Bank Act, and they make it very clear who it's for. Um, the Freedmen Bank says um, words like for those formerly enslaved and their descendants. Um, the Freedmen Bureau Act literally says freedmen will get their 40 acres. So it makes very clear like what all these things are for and who they're for. There's no ambiguity when you actually read the history and go back to the original sources. So we have to make sure our legislation today reflects that clarity and um, makes it as specific to who it was intended for. But yeah, let's see. Um, this thing is 60 pages. I don't want to read through all of it right now, but I think we could, if we want, we could probably break this down maybe over a month and like read through it or something. But it is worth looking more at. I think the one thing that took everybody's attention away was the 5 million for eligible persons. So like most of the other recommendations in here are not even discussed on the mainstream level. Um, or in the mainstream media. So it'd be interesting to kind of look deeper at that. But excuse me. Uh, we also like what was suggested earlier, finding someone who qualifies for this program and see what their thoughts are as well. Um, I think that would be a good idea. So if you know anybody who is like born between 1940 and 1996, um, or moved to San Francisco between those dates, um, or even earlier, um, let us know so we can kind of like interview them and kind of get their feedback. But any other thoughts on this before we start wrapping up? I thought this eligibility thing would take longer, but it's actually not as long as it sounds. So
You know what, Eric? I think it's great to break it down and really dig into it because we have to start teaching our people to start to not just, and I know it's about time and, our responsibilities with our families and work and da 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 da. But we have to start going in and looking at these skills and not leave it to, other groups or journalists or so-called journalists to do that for us because, like you just said, there's a lot more. 60 pages. I wasn't of that, so we can start extrapolating things out of it, and and then we can determine if there needs to be a call to action about it.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I think this is like when we try to share documents in our spaces, I always try to go to the original source so we're not reading from, someone's opinion. I think you mentioned earlier how most media is like kind of opinion now. And it's really true. A lot of it's kind of like really silly titles like, um, do you agree with this or don't you? And it's like there's all of it is kind of like a this or that, or it's like some silly, no one kind of tries to take focus on the truth. They're just more interested on getting both sides to be viewers and pay for clicks to ads and get them more money, right? So then they're not really interested necessarily in sharing what's really informative. Um, the other thing I actually wanted to share while I have y'all attention since this came out today. We did a space yesterday um, on the debt limit and kind of what was happening in terms of that. And Janet Yellen just put out a new um, letter to Congress, mainly to the House of Representatives, because they have the power of the purse, which means they control the money. Um, so actually, I'm going to read through her letter. It's pretty short, just to give everybody an update. Um, so, so the Honorable Kevin McCarthy, Speaker, U.S. House of Representatives, Washington D.C. 20515. This is from earlier today, January 19th. Dear Mr. Speaker, I write to keep you appraised of actions the Treasury Department is taking in regard to the debt limit. In my letter of January 13, 2023, I noted that Public Law 11773 increased its statutory debt limit to a level of 31.381 trillion and informed you that beginning on January 19th, the outstanding debt of the United States was projected to reach the statutory limit. This letter serves to notify you, pursuant 5 USC 8348 L2, of the extraordinary measures Treasury began using today. First, I have determined that by reason of the statutory debt limit, I will be unable to fully invest a portion of the Civil Service Retirement and Disability Fund, CSRDF, not immediately required to pay beneficiaries, and that a debt issuance suspension period will begin on Thursday, January 19, 2023, and last through Monday, June 5th, 2023. My predecessors have declared debt issuance suspension periods under similar circumstances. With these determinations, the Treasury Department will suspend additional investments of amounts credited to and redeem a portion of the investments held by the CSRDF as expressly authorized by law. In addition, because the Postal Accountability and Enhancement Act of 2006 provides that investments in the Postal Service Retirement Health Benefits Fund, PSRHBF, shall be made in the same manner as investments for the CSRDF, Treasury will suspend additional investments of amounts credited to the PSRHBF. By law, the CSRDF and the PSRHBF will be made whole once the debt limit is increased or suspended. Federal retirees and employees will be unaffected by these actions. As I stated in my January 13th letter, the period of time that extraordinary measures may last is subject to considerable uncertainty, including the challenges of forecasting the payments and recipients of the U.S. government months into the future. I respectfully urge Congress to act promptly to protect the full faith and credit of the United States. This is by Janet Yellen, Secretary of the Treasury. So that's the latest. Basically, she sent the letter on the 13th. We read through that yesterday and talked about, what the implications were. She mainly in this one updated and actually gave a date of June 5th as kind of like when resources will be exhausted or when extraordinary measures will be exhausted. Um, and so, in terms of everything else, she's kind of updating the Speaker of the House, who is Kevin McCarthy, a Republican, and he's letting him know, like, hey, you guys need to pass because the House has the power of the purse. You guys need to increase the debt limit so we make sure we are able to pay our bills so that people maintain trust in the U.S. economy and will continue to buy U.S. bonds and things like that, which help fund the U.S. government, right? So that's kind of the last update I wanted to share. Um, Other than that, any last thoughts before we start to wrap up?
Thank you for being here and thank you for your work. I'm just a little under the weather, so I'm gonna drop off.
No worries. Thank you for being
I'll
here.
see you tomorrow.
Yes, thank you for being here, Phoenix. Appreciate it. I appreciate your thoughts. Um, how about you, Phoenix? Or sorry, Queen Bee? How about you?
Yeah, I'd like to thank you also for being here and for making the information available to us. You're always really organized and have the documents, so I'm really glad that you're doing that, Eric, and taking the time to help us all to understand, what these documents are. Because you're absolutely right. The media presents what they think is going to be provocative and they hype it up and to get people, fussing with each other. And most of the time, people don't even take the time to even read the documents.
Mm-hmm.
They just go off of whatever the media is telling them. Exactly. So I'm really glad that you have been sharing this information so that we can all get better educated on these things.
Thank you. Yeah. To me, it's super important that we're able to kind of get the knowledge ourselves. And I always think back to like Frederick Douglass when he thinks about like how he couldn't learn to read and how he had to like sneak off to learn how to read and like teach himself and stuff like that. So I always go back to like moments like that where it's like, this is the knowledge we need to not only know but share, and it's the knowledge that they're not going to give us on a silver platter. They're going to force feed us like the junk food, which is like the media. It's like fast and it's like fast food. It's like unhealthy and not very informative, not very nutritious, right? Um, and so when you go to the source, like where they get all their information from in the first place, then you can make your own decision informed with your own perspective of how things could be, how things should be. Um, and we're able to actually not make assumptions about things. We can actually say, nope, this is actually what they said, and we don't have to guess about interpretation or certain things like that. So super important.
Keep up the good work.
Thank you. Yeah, and I appreciate you all coming because we try to like this is part of our political education. We're gonna keep doing these daily spaces Monday through Friday, and the main challenge will be keeping up with all the information that comes in and deciding what makes sense to actually pay attention to. Like tomorrow, um, like I was going to do this space today, but I decided let's cover the San Francisco thing since that's kind of getting a lot of media attention, but it seems like there's not a clear consensus. But I was going to do a space today on how do we remove people from political office, particularly Congress, um, which would include people like George Santos, for example. And there's actually in the Constitution ways to do this. And I've kind of just seen again on the media all this talk, even on both sides. Both like the Democrats are like, yeah, we hate Santos, and then the Republicans are like, we don't support Santos either. And I'm just thinking, well, why haven't y'all removed him from office? Like, because they have the power to. So it's kind of like a lot of posturing and you know flexing and seeming like they're going to do something, but a lot of nothing because, like, if you looked at the House Speaker election, um, the Democrats had 212 for like Hakeem Jeffries, right? And then we know the Republicans had 218. That's how they got the majority, right? So like you only need 290 votes to remove someone from the House. So whether it's 212 plus some amount of Republicans or 218 plus some amount of Democrats, they could easily, if they're so angry at George Santos or any other person in Congress, they could easily remove them. But it doesn't seem like they have the actual will to. So we're just going to kind of like break that down a little more tomorrow.
Yeah, and it would be hard because what are they're gonna remove him? What, because they say he lied? Well, they all lied.
Yeah, I think that's actually I actually
they point the finger.
right. I think that's the actual real thing that it would set a precedent of like
Right.
they all know they're full of crap and
Exactly.
they're like, if we do this, when will this stop?
Well, plus they Kevin McCarthy put him on a committee or two.
Yeah, he actually did put him on a few committees.
I mean, he's only a freshman.
I think he's on like the SEC committee actually, or something like that. Like something ridiculous like that. He got sued by them or something. So yeah, he's all over the place.
They're like, I dare you to get rid of me because I know some things about you.
Yeah, exactly. They're like, They're like, no, we're not gonna touch that. That's Pandora's box. Once they open that, no, it's crazy. But yeah, we still got to know how the government works because I feel like when it comes to whether it's like how we fund things in the government, how the debt ceiling work, or something like how we remove people from office, either not just on Congress, but also on the local level, like recall elections and things like that. Um, we got to get into not only the process of hiring people with our votes, but also being able to fire them when they don't do their jobs. Um, and that's really the key: hire and fire, especially when it comes to politicians, because once they get in, they can feel comfortable and feel like you don't have any reproach. But when you know these rules that exist, then you can threaten them and be like, "Nah, bro, Rule 226 says I can fire you at any moment." So they're like, "Oh, damn, how do they know this?"
Right, and we can also, I think, well, I don't know, I'll wait till you bring it up
Yeah.
tomorrow because I've been hearing some things too about how you can get rid of them, but I don't know how true they are, so I'll just wait.
Yeah, we can
facts tomorrow.
Yeah, we can bring it up tomorrow. We'll throw it in discussion and kind of just look at it and see what we can actually do legally. So yeah, we'll be back tomorrow, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 Eastern. So everybody have a great rest of your Thursday. We'll be back Friday, so TGIF, a little bit early, and keep an eye on the debt limit conversation and be informed about that. Appreciate y'all all for coming. So have a great day. Peace.